Welcome to the CT Educator Podcast. I am your host, Karina Hogan. I am a registered CT technologist with 20 years of experience and knowledge. I help new CT technologists level up their CT training so that you can become a successful technologist. I'm also a mom and committed to sharing my knowledge and expertise to help you build your confidence, know the CT basics so that you can deliver quality patient care. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the CT Educator Podcast. Welcome back. So I apologize that I may sound nasally. I have allergies. Looks like I've got a cold. Hopefully it's not COVID. But I will do my best to get through this episode. And hopefully not sneeze through this episode. So, in this episode, I really want to dive into how COVID-19 has changed the dynamics in CT departments and just radiology in general. Now, currently, because the weather has been very, very up and down, in the hospital I work at, so I work at a level 1 trauma hospital, there have been an uprise in COVID cases lately. So we went from having, I think it was like 2 COVID patients, then we had 0, then we had 3, then we had 0 again. Now we have 19. So they have been talking about it in the news that there is an uprise in COVID patients, which I don't think it's really surprising to any of us. But what I really want to talk about is how COVID has really changed just the dynamics on how we operate. And it has made us not crazy per se, but it has made our department there is a strain in just a lot of burnout that is going on because of the way this has changed the dynamics on how radiology operates in general. Like I can tell you the hiring process right now for us, it's difficult. We can't recruit CT techs. And a lot of people were scratching their heads like, why? Now, during COVID, we experienced a lot of shortages. I mean, we were short because there was people out for COVID, people that were sick, encountering patients, they quarantined you for, 10 days and all this and that. And you would have employee health ask you a ton of questions, which, oh my God, I got those phone calls all the time where they would ask you a shit ton of questions. And they're like, oh, well, do you remember this patient from like 2 months ago? How are you expecting me to remember that patient was COVID positive? And do I remember encountering them? Like, what kind of shit is this? And those are some of the dynamics that I believe was happening, if that would happen at your hospital, what was happening at the hospital I worked at. So, the aftermath of the pandemic, we have seen things shift where we see a lot of techs traveling. They're taking more traveling assignments and just, want to make that extra pay. Like I know currently we have 2 travelers and they're excellent CT techs, just wonderful people. And I wish we could keep them, but one of them lives about 3 or 4 hours away from, Illinois. He lives in Indiana. And he's kind of settled his life, in Indiana, even though we would love to keep him. And the other tech is taking another assignment, after December. So the way we operate is we are just short. Like the shifts are short. There's so many open shifts. They are combining jobs. I've seen this at other facilities, around my state, that they are just making technologists in the job description to be like a X-ray/CT tech or a CT/MR, and just combining those two just job descriptions and making them have one like pay grade and to do two modalities, so they've created like this multi-modality technologist position. And from what I understand, because I've talked to a few fellow techs, they're not really getting any pay incentive. They're not getting any more extra money to do it. And because of being short staffed, can't fill the shifts, the recruiting is just so difficult. It seems like hospitals have adapted this model to have these modality, I can't even speak, technologists, and the pay is just not quite there. And I've seen the shift where I have, fellow technologists that are good friends of mine that are taking some of these positions and they're not getting what they're worth. So they're quitting that and just going off to travel and making $100 an hour. So it has really shifted on how we staff our departments and how just the burnout is like really there. We're working constantly. I know I'm working constantly and I am just exhausted. Like something has to give because we need you to do more and more in X, Y, and Z and more, but we don't have enough staff to do that. We don't have enough resources to do that. So I honestly think that COVID and the way the dynamics are run, not only in CT and radiology and other departments in our modality, but just in the hospital in general, this dynamic has really shifted. And I know some people talk about, oh, there might be, another pandemic. Okay. I don't know whether that's true or not, but, you can't always believe everything you hear until you fact check everything. And just going through the whole pandemic, pre, during, and then post, I mean, it was a rough ride. I'll tell you, it was no fucking cakewalk. And I can tell you that it has altered the way I look at healthcare as a whole because so many things came to light and it's just the burnout and the stress and the exhaustion is just it's twofold. So I would be curious to know your thoughts on how you think, post pandemic, during, pre, whatever the case may be, or even currently now, on your thoughts on how you think it has shifted the dynamic in radiology and in CT as a whole. Love to know your thoughts on that because I'm always curious and I always love to hear, everybody's perspective on it. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. And please you can always email me. I will leave the email and my Instagram handle on the show notes. Don't be afraid to reach out. I love questions. I love to hear your stories. And if you got any interesting stories, I'm always open to hear it. Check me out on Instagram at the CT Educator. My DMs are always open. I respond to all my DMs. Okay. Sometimes it may be a day or two. So I apologize because, I do work full time. Love to hear your thoughts. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and I will see you guys next week. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you would like to share your CT experience, have an interesting story to share, or need help in your CT training, please email me your questions at contact@thecteducator.com. Come on over to Instagram at the CT Educator. My DMs are always open, so let's chat. Thank you for joining me on this podcast and happy scanning.